So, in a way, what this does is, if you think about politics this way, this changes the definition of success. Now, I've given you an example of how a real public backlash might change the Supreme Court decision, but even if it didn't, it would damage the conservative movement even further if we set this up. Conservatives learned 40 years ago when their ideas were laughed out of everywhere, right? They couldn't do most of what they're doing now 40 years ago. In fact, in the 1950s, Dwight Eisenhower said that, you know, we've gotten to the point in our society where there are only a couple of crazy billionaires in Texas who don't think that the government has to play a vital role in our economy in creating social welfare. That's how it was in the 1950s when conservatives were in the wilderness. They redefined victory for years and years until they get victory. So the way we need to think about victory is we can have some incremental victories, but we're not passing things in the state legislature, right? Does anyone think we're going to pass anything good in the state legislature that's going to be signed by this governor? But can we create an opinion climate where we're making it really clear to people what they're doing, number one, and number two, we are putting forward proactive, positive agenda items that people want for them to reject, which will damage them and build up our movement. So we need to redefine victory. And in healthcare, I just said how their latest brilliant attack on healthcare reform is actually a huge opportunity for us if we think about it correctly. So what we're going to be doing in Citizen Action, and we would be happy to work with you on any of the issue items that matter to you. In fact, I met with Monica's office Friday, is we're going to have them introduce bills that they're interested in, but they're not bills to be passed. They're bills to embarrass the other side on the right values and the right issues in order to reveal who they are and to put pressure on them and to build public support. So we, of course, will be moving forward on taking the Magicare money. By the way, we think that he may take the Magicare money because he has a $300 million, you're losing $300 million by turning it down, and he has a huge budget deficit. He wants to, as you know, spend a lot more money paving over the state, right? He doesn't have the money. And so, frankly, and there are ways he can take the money that he can declare victory over. Iowa has Walker's plan federally funded through waiver. So he can say, that's all my idea, the administrations came around with my idea, so I'm taking the money. So we think we have a fighting chance to do that. So occasionally there are real victories that are possible. But for example, I'll give you an example of one that we're not going to win on. Now, we talked about this at the end of the election. So remember all the big controversy about outsourcing that took place in July when Scott Walker, of all people, attacked Harry Burke for being an outsourcer at Trek Bicycle, and then it came back, of course, around on him that WEDC is funding outsourcers all the time, right? And so what ended up happening was that Walker made these declarations, because it didn't work out that well for him, that there would be no money for outsourcing at WEDC. And so the issue sort of went away, so much so that even though it was the subject of all the television ads, and the most of them in July and early August, it wasn't even asked about in the two governors' debates. Now the second governor's debate was some of the worst questions I've ever seen, by the way. The first one was a little better, but they didn't even ask about it, okay? So we found out, Kevin Kane, our lead organizer, and I were digging into it. It was very hard to find out what WEDC's policies were because they don't actually, unlike a real public agency, create policies that are public and you can look at. We had to get the minutes, and the minutes were, shall we say, probably less detailed than what your minutes are for Grassroots Waukesha. So it turned out that he didn't close the WEDC loopholes at all on outsourcing. And so all he did was said that companies have to, within 30 days, report that they did any outsourcing, and that you can't use actual WEDC money for the outsourcing. So of course you can drive a Mack truck through that, you outsource with your own money, and then you take other WEDC money to create additional jobs that may produce less jobs than you already outsourced with the other hand. And so we brought this up right before the election, and mainstream media like the Journal Sentinel actually would not publish this, even though they themselves had misled their own readers by claiming that Walker had closed the outsourcing loophole. But if you think about it, and this gets back to the strategy I'm talking about, why is outsourcing is powerful for everyone, and unlike minimum wage, everyone is terrified of outsourcing because everyone knows they're at risk of it, and they're going up the economic chain of the complexity of jobs they can outsource, right? It just started originally with very menial jobs, but now it's gotten up to accountants, to all sorts of other professions, white-collar professionals, right? And so it connects with people. Outsourcing connects with all sorts of voters. That's why Walker used it. He has the most expensive polling in the world. He knows how it polls, right? But if you think about it, outsourcing is a gateway, if you do it right, to explaining a progressive economic agenda. The only way you prevent outsourcing with public money, with all of our own efforts to create jobs, is to particularly put standards in. And you need standards in general. Standards that say, if you're going to get a grant loan tax credit, that you are going to produce this number of jobs, they're going to be good family supporting jobs, and they're going to be in places that people need it most, and people placed in the highest poverty. And if you don't do that, you have to give the money back. So an anti-outsourcing standard is essentially a surrogate for a progressive economic agenda, how we should invest in creating jobs in the economy. But it emotionally connects with people now. So if we just use outsourcing and do it in kind of a xenophobic way, such as we're against those workers in Mexico and China and India, then that doesn't really produce a progressive worldview. But if we do it in terms of with our money, the money is for what? The money is for creating opportunity for our people. No one has a right to a subsidy. No business does unless they're doing something that's publicly beneficial, like creating more economic opportunity. And so it's a way that connects with people, that's emotional. It can, if we do it right, be a gateway to building support for a broader view of the economy and a progressive economic